Good morning. Welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission. This is day 2 of our trial type evidentiary hearing in case number 9629 with respect to Skipjack's Offshore Wind Energy LLC's qualified offshore wind projects compliance with conditions approved in 2017. The commission will come to order. We'll begin with the next witness. I believe that Skipjack is ready to sponsor.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, we're calling to the witness stand Dr. Corey Lang. As I had mentioned yesterday during my opening, the Maryland legislature has already deemed offshore wind development to be in the economic well-being of the state. But Dr. Lang is being called as a rebuttal witness in light of the fact that Ocean City has called a economist from North Carolina to discuss issues in this case. So we would call Dr. Lang as a rebuttal witness.
Thank you. Mr. Curran, your audio is a little sketchy today. We've heard everything you said, but just if there's anything you can do to improve the quality. Dr. Lang, if you would please turn on your microphone and raise your right hand.
Okay, I'm here.
Good morning, Doctor. Do you swear and affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Dr. Lang, would you please state your occupation and title, sir?
Yes. I'm an environmental economist. My title is Associate Professor of Environmental and Natural Resource Economics at the University of Maryland.
And what is your business address, sir?
My business address is Coastal Institute 214, 1 Greenhouse Road, University of Rhode Island, Kingston, Rhode Island, 02881.
Thank you, sir. And where do you work, Dr. Lang?
I work at the University of Rhode Island.
How long have you been there?
I've been here 9 years.
And your title at the, I'm sorry, let me catch it again. Your title at the University of Rhode Island?
Absolutely. It's Associate Professor.
Thank you. And Dr. Lang, where did you attend school, if I could ask you?
I received my undergraduate degree at Carleton College in Minnesota. I received a bachelor's degree in mathematics, and then I received a PhD in economics from Cornell University.
Is there a particular field of economics that you specialize in after you got your doctorate?
I do. I specialize in environmental economics.
And in environmental economics and economics, are there fields of interest that you have focused on?
A number. A lot of my work focuses on non-market valuation as well as energy economics.
Let me ask you, sir, could you explain to the commission what non-market valuation is?
Certainly. It's the trying to estimate or understand people's values for goods and services that cannot be bought or sold in a common marketplace.
Thank you. And in that field of research, have you had an opportunity to conduct studies and research?
I have. I've published a number of papers in the field of non-market valuation.
And these published studies or research, have they been peer reviewed?
Yes, all of my publications have gone through anonymous peer review.
Have any of them involved energy generation or renewables?
Yes, I have conducted, excuse me, 4 studies of non-market valuation related to energy generation, energy production.
And you mentioned your address is at the University of Rhode Island. Do you teach classes at the university?
I do. Part of my contract is to teach classes. I teach classes in econometrics and energy policy.
Your background, sir, does that allow you to reach opinions on economic impacts of renewable projects?
It does.
And have you reached any opinions in this proceeding?
I have. I have reached the opinion that moving from an 8 to 12 megawatt turbine design for the Skipjack project will have no adverse consequences to tourism in Ocean City and may have small positive impacts.
And did you base that opinion on your background in any particular economic literature and research?
Yes, I did. One data point I considered was my own research. Last year, I published a study related to the tourism impacts of the Block Island wind farm, as well as a review of the broader literature related to tourism impacts offshore.
And thank you. Is that reviewing literature and have that, is that an acceptable method in your field of reaching opinions on economic impacts of renewable projects?
It is.
Your Honor, at this time, we would tender this witness as an expert in the field of economics.
And this is Elise Prouty on behalf of the town of Ocean City. We just briefly have some audio.
You may proceed, Ms. Party.
Dr. Lang, you've never before given testimony in any regulatory proceeding?
No.
And the study that you conducted as to Block Island, that's the only publication you've authored related to offshore wind?
That's correct.
We have nothing further.
Thank you, Ms. Party. Based on Dr. Lang's research and resume, his publications in sustainability and tourism, his background in energy economics, and the publications that he has published and is peer-reviewed, I find that he will be qualified as an expert to provide opinions with respect to the testimony contained in his rebuttal submission. You may proceed, Mr. Curran.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Lang, do you have before you a document that has been marked as Skipjack Exhibit 6? I hope it's 6, entitled The Rebuttal Testimony of Dr. Corey Lang, PhD, dated May the 22nd, 2020, consisting of 22 pages and 2 exhibits.
Yes, I do have that, and it is Exhibit 6.
Thank you. And was this testimony, Dr. Lang, prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes, it was.
And let me ask you, sir, today, do you have any corrections, additions, or deletions to your testimony?
I do have one correction. It is on page 12 of my rebuttal testimony.
All right, give me a second to get there. Okay, thank you. And where is your edit or correction, sir?
It's in footnote 12 about the Westerberg et al. Citation.
Okay,
My testimony states that the journal that this article was published in is called the Journal of Tourism Management. It is actually just called Tourism Management. And so the words Journal of should be deleted.
thank you. Are there any other edits or corrections to your testimony?
I do not.
Well, thank you. Sir, with that correction, if I were to ask you the same questions today that are contained in your rebuttal testimony, would your answers be the same?
They would.
And is this testimony true and correct to the best of your information, knowledge, and belief?
It is.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, we would respectfully move Skipjack Exhibit 6 into evidence. And Dr. Lang, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Skipjack Exhibit number 6, containing the rebuttal testimony, and Exhibits CPL 1 and 2 are moved into evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Lang is now available for cross-examination.
Thank you. We'll begin by the examination by the town of Ocean City.
Dr. Lang, as part of the study that you did as to Block Island, you only looked at data from Airbnbs.
That is correct.
You didn't look at data from other vacation rentals, such as hotels or houses or condos that were rented through a rental company?
You're correct.
Your study doesn't show anything about whether individuals who stayed at Block Island for one summer even returned the following summer?
Are you asking about individual behavior and whether we track individuals? Can you rephrase?
So this, you didn't do any sort of study as to whether individuals returned to Block Island the summer of 2018, the first summer after the wind turbines were put in?
I see. Thank you for clarifying. No, we did not have data for 2018.
And you don't have data as to 2019 either?
That is correct.
And there could be numerous reasons why Airbnb rentals increased from 2014 to 2017 that has no correlation to the development of the Block Island wind farm.
Do you have specific reasons in mind?
I'm asking you the question.
Okay. No, I have no reason to believe there was something else that led to that increase.
Well, Airbnb, their consultants made a big push in 2017, correct? Right before the turbines went in to attract more people to using Airbnb, right?
March 2017 was right after they went in, but you're right. Yeah, we talked with people on the island, and yeah, we learned that the consultants made a visit and tried to increase the number of properties on Airbnb.
And it could also just be that in 2017, Airbnb as a company was becoming more popular and use of Airbnbs were becoming more popular. Is that right?
That is possible. It would not explain the differential increase that we observe on Block Island.
And could it also be that there was a marketing push in 2017 by Block Island to attract more visitors?
I don't know.
And when you say, so looking at page 4 of your testimony,
Okay.
so when you say that you found that tourism activity increased in Block Island after the construction of the wind farm, you're only speaking to an increase in tourists for 2 months during the first summer that the turbines were constructed. Is that right?
Is there a specific?
Hold on a second. Counsel, can you specify what line you're looking at on page 4?
Sure. You give me a moment. So is it your testimony that you found that tourism activity increased in Block Island after the construction of the wind farm?
Yes, that is the general conclusion.
But your study only showed that there was an increase in Airbnb use for the peak month, two months of the summer of 2017, correct?
That is correct.
You didn't see any sort of increase in tourism in 2017 other than those 2 months, July and August.
That's correct. July and August are the peak tourism months there, and that is the only. Those are the only months we observed an increase.
So you didn't observe that in September, October, November, after the turbines were installed, that there was any sort of increase in tourism at Block Island?
You're correct.
And you would agree that the long-term trajectory of your study might be very different in terms of tourism at Block Island?
I don't know if I would say very different. It is possible that the long-term trajectory may be different.
And you would agree that it's difficult to extrapolate the results of your study to other communities, such as Ocean City?
No, I would not agree.
Well, you in fact told North American Wind Power in an interview that that was the case, correct?
I don't know.
And isn't that included in your study? That there's a section discussing that it would be difficult to extrapolate the results from to other communities?
Would you like to point me towards that piece of my study? And
Well, do you agree that that's part of your study, that you say that it's difficult to extrapolate that other results to other communities?
I think that this is a valuable data point in this decision that Skipjack and Ocean City are making.
So that wasn't really my question, though, but you would agree that it's difficult to extrapolate these results to other beach communities?
Counsel, if you're inquiring of the witness with regard to his study, we should allow him an opportunity to take a look at the site.
Yes. So if you want to pull up your study, Dr. Lang.
And counsel, when you refer to study, you're referring to exhibit CPL-2?
Yes, that's correct. It's part of my understanding, Skipjack Exhibit 6.
Yes, Skipjack Exhibit 6. Within that, since we bundle them, it's exhibit CPL-2, a journal article entitled Sustainability and Tourism, the Effect of the United States' First Offshore Wind Farm on the Vacation Rental Market. Is that what you're referring to as the study?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So looking at your study, Dr. Lang, would you agree that you include that it would be difficult to extrapolate the results to other beach communities?
Is there a specific page? I don't recall writing that. Is there a specific page that you can point me to?
It's indulgence, commission's indulgence. Okay. We'll return to that, but you agreed, you have no recollection of saying that to the North American Wind Power in an interview?
I'm sorry, I do not recall that.
And you stated that you plan to follow up with your study with an investigation of perceptions of the wind farm from the perspective of those who actually live on Block Island year-round. That has not been done, correct?
It is ongoing research. We are studying not so much perceptions, but property value impacts instead of rental impacts.
And no conclusions have yet been drawn from that?
No.
And would you agree that it's one thing to look at a turbine for a few days and be mesmerized by it, but having it there constantly may be different?
I don't know.
And you don't recall telling that to North American Wind Power in an interview?
I do not recall that at the moment, no.
Do you have any reason to think that you didn't say that?
No.
Objection.
Yeah.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Dr. Lang, you didn't do any sort of survey of individuals to determine what led them to come to Block Island in 2017?
That's correct.
So you have no idea as to any of the individuals who stayed at Airbnbs during the summer of 2017, whether they were drawn to Block Island because of the turbines or whether they came to Block Island for any other number of reasons?
You're correct.
And your survey states on page, or your study, my apologies, states on page 52 that it's likely that few Block Island Airbnb properties in our sample are in direct viewshed of the wind farm. Do you know how many of the Airbnbs that you looked at as part of your study were in direct view of the wind turbines?
I'm sorry, Counsel, what page are you on?
Page 52 of his study.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, the copy that we're using goes to page 47.
The copy that I have marked by Skipjack as exhibit CPL2, I'm looking at the numbers in the upper left corner.
Okay, gotcha. I'm sorry, 57?
52.
Got it, thank you.
I appear to be having technical difficulties. I'm not sure what's displaying. Seems like we're still communicating verbally, but it says Cisco WebEx service is not responding.
Dr. Lang, this is the chairman.
Yes.
We could hear you, but we no longer see you on the screen.
Okay. Do you want me to continue as is or try to rejoin the meeting?
Would be ideal if you could rejoin the meeting. So why don't we try that? If you could just
Okay.
cancel and come back.
Okay, I apologize. So I'm going to close the program and re-enter.
Okay. Mr. Lang, are you back? Dr. Lang, are you back with us?
I believe I am. I apologize.
There you are. Ms. Prade, you may continue.
I believe there is an outstanding question. I can ask it again. Your survey, your study stated on page 52 that it's likely that few Block Island Airbnb properties in our sample are in direct view shed of the wind farm. Do you have any idea as to the number of Airbnbs that you looked at in your study that were actually in the direct view shed of the wind farm?
No, we do not have that info.
So it could be that the majority of the Airbnb properties that you looked at weren't actually in direct view of the turbines. Is that right?
I don't know.
Very few properties on the south side.
And you would agree that there's very few properties on the south side of Block Island where the turbines are located?
I do not know that.
And you state in your study on page 65 that the study is not capturing behavioral responses of single-day visitors.
Counsel for Ocean City, if you could please give us an idea, these are single space, top of the page, bottom of the page, that sort of thing.
Sure, I can try to do so.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. Ling, would you agree that your study does not capture behavioral responses of single-day visitors?
I would agree with that.
And you would agree that the study doesn't capture behavioral responses of individuals who book through other rental platforms?
I would agree.
And you acknowledge in your study, correct, that an interest in the Block Island wind farm could have led to a displacement of visitors to the control locations that you looked at?
I believe we discussed the possibility of a displacement from control locations to Block Island.
And you state on page 65 of your study that research using more comprehensive data is needed to explore whether preferences of the Block Island wind farm revealed in this study are representative of the tourist population at large. Is that correct?
Counsel, again, when we cite to this study, if you could tell us what paragraph we're looking at.
I'm looking at the second paragraph on page 65, sort of in the middle of it.
Is that the paragraph that begins with our study or the overarching objective?
That's correct, the one that starts with our study.
Thank you.
Can you restate your question one more time now that I've found the spot?
Sure. You would agree that your study found that research using more comprehensive data is needed to explore whether preferences for the Block Island wind farm revealed in this study are representative of the tourist population at large?
I would agree. This is a study of the first, there is only one offshore wind farm in the United States. This is the first revealed preference study of that. More research is needed.
And you would agree that the wind turbines used at Block Island are significantly smaller than the ones that Skipjack plans to use?
I would agree that they are smaller.
And you would agree that there's only 5 turbines in Block Island, correct, as opposed to the 12 that Skipjack intends to use here?
That's right. Block Island is 5 6-megawatt turbines.
And since Block Island is the first wind farm in the United States, it may have elicited more excitement or interest than Skipjack's wind farm or other future wind farms may on tourism?
You know, that's possible, but it's also possible that subsequent ones will generate equal interest.
And you've done no studies looking at interest as to future possible wind farms in other locations?
No, I have not.
And you've done no analysis of the Ocean City rental market?
That is correct.
You've done no surveys as to the types of renters who come to Ocean City as to whether they are renting Airbnbs versus condos versus houses?
No, I have not.
You've made no attempt to quantify any property value impacts to Ocean City rental market as a result of the Skipjack project?
Can you restate that?
You've made no attempt to quantify any possible property value impacts to Ocean City's rental market as a result of the Skipjack project?
I have not performed any original research, but I have come to the conclusion of likely, zero or small positive impacts to tourism and resulting of these of Skipjack.
But you've done no tax revenue impact study.
Madam Court Reporter, we need to unmute you. There we go. We can hear you now, Linda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Lang's trailed off on the last part of his answer, the tourism.
Can you read back what you have from Dr. Lang?
I have not performed any original research, but I have come to the conclusion likely zero or small positive impacts, the tourism. I think he said something after that.
I may have trailed off, I apologize. To tourism in Ocean City.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Lang conducted no tax revenue impact study to Ocean City as to the Skipjack project?
No, I have not.
And you've done no analysis of Ocean City vacationers' opinions regarding the change in the Skipjack project turbine size from 8 megawatts to 12 megawatts?
Your Honor, I'm sorry, I could not hear that question. Would counsel repeat it again?
Sure. Dr. Lang, You've done no analysis or surveys of Ocean City vacationers' opinions regarding the change in the Skipjack project turbine size from 8 to 12 megawatts?
No, I have not.
Nor have you done so for residents of Ocean City?
No, I have not.
And you've done no study as to the physical or the socioeconomic characteristics of individuals who come to Ocean City for vacation?
No, I have not.
And taking a look at the last paragraph before acknowledgements on page 65 of your study, I'm looking at about the middle of that last paragraph, the one that starts the overarching objective.
Okay.
You state that further offshore wind farms in the U.S. will differ from the Block Island wind farm in terms of the number of turbines, installed capacity, proximity to and visibility from the shoreline and beach, and the physical and socioeconomic characteristics of the surrounding community. So you would agree that your study could not necessarily be extrapolated to Ocean City if there's differences in the physical or the socioeconomic characteristics of visitors to Ocean City?
I think that's too strong of a conclusion. Yes, there are differences in the layout, turbines, size of turbines, socioeconomic characteristics of the community. But I still argue this is a valuable data point for the commission to consider.
And you would agree that caution should be used in trying to generalize the results of your study to other offshore wind farms?
Certainly some caution, and that's one reason I performed a literature review, to get a better sense of what other studies have said.
And the studies that you looked at in your literature review, none of those involved 12 megawatt turbines?
That is correct.
None of them involved 8 megawatt turbines?
That is correct.
The largest one in the literature review that you looked at was a 6 megawatt turbine?
That is correct.
And you have no way of knowing whether the vacation preferences of individuals in Ocean City are the same vacation preferences as those who visit Block Island?
Certainly, I have not done that research. Again, I've relied on some of my literature review to understand what Maryland residents' preferences are, or broader preferences on the East Coast.
And you've done no studies or analysis as to whether individuals would come to Ocean City for the purpose of seeing wind turbines, have you?
I personally have not done that research. Some of the research I've reviewed does look at that type of question.
But not specifically as to Ocean City?
I believe you're right. It's more general about beach trips in general.
I have nothing further, Dr. Lang.
Additional cross-examination by any of the parties? Hearing none, before the commissioners, counsel for Skipjack, do you have any redirect?
I think there's one question, Your Honor. Dr. Lang, you were being examined by Ocean City's counsel in connection with the study's findings about an increase in tourism during the peak months during your study year. Do you recall those questions?
I do recall them.
Now, during your study, did you also do an examination of the non-peak months as well?
Yes, both non-peak and peak months were included in the study.
During your examination of the non-peak months, was there any conclusion that there would be a diminution in tourism during the non-peak months?
No, that was not the conclusion. The conclusion was just no change.
And also, Counsel for Ocean City had asked you questions about the characteristics of the offshore wind facilities in Block Island. Do you recall those questions?
Yes, I do.
And Counsel had mentioned that there are 5 turbines that are located in Block Island,
That's correct.
and they're of the 6 megawatt character.
That is correct.
And if you know, how close are those, is that facility to the shore of Block Island?
It is approximately 3 miles from the southeastern shore of Block Island.
And that would be significantly closer to the shore than the proposed Skipjack wind project in Ocean City, correct?
That would be significantly closer, yes.
Did that factor into any of your opinions that you reached in this proceeding?
It does. It features prominently. And if I could direct you to page 9 of my rebuttal testimony. On this page, figure 1 is a photograph taken from that southeastern shore of Block Island. And what I see are 5 turbines that are far more visually prominent than any of the visual simulations we saw yesterday for either the 8 or the 12. The 8 or the 12 megawatt configurations for Skipjack. Because of the visual prominence in Block Island and the positive tourism impacts, that was very important in determining my opinion that the Skipjack facility will likely have maybe muted positive impacts or no, and certainly no adverse impacts to tourism in Ocean City.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's all the redirect I have.
Thank you. Do commissioners have any questions of Dr. Lang? Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Lang, can you go to page 21, I believe, last page of your rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I found page 21.
Okay. If you, hang on, I'm getting there. Oops, I'm sorry, that's the wrong page. Hang on, let me get the right page. It's page 24, I believe. The last question, and in the very last sentence on page 24 in lines 11 through 13, you're talking about reaching an inflection point at 5 to 15 miles offshore, after which the project is likely to have a net positive impact. And that's, you're talking about the review of the literature there. Could you expound upon that inflection point concept? What are you talking about there?
Of course, I do think this is an important point. Several of the several of the stated preference studies I review, they're able to look at hypothetical scenarios of turbines at different distances, sometimes ranging from 2.5 to 20 miles, so a large range. And several of these studies find that initially, when turbines, these again hypothetical turbines, are close to shore, they're finding negative impacts to tourism, to perceptions, a variety of indicators. And then as they move further from shore, those negatives diminish, and sometimes there are positive reactions that increase. And so there's a turning point where reactions go from negative, net negative to net positive.
Okay, and some of that literature review came out of more recent Maryland studies than the stated preference of the North Carolina study. Is that right?
That is correct. I'm just going to turn to my lit review a little bit to make sure I have this stuff in mind. Yeah, recently, a very comprehensive research study was undertaken by Parsons and Firestone, 2018. I'm looking at page 16 of my rebuttal testimony where I give some details on Parsons and Firestone. And they do a survey of people all over the East Coast, not just Maryland, but certainly including Maryland. And very detailed study, lots of range and distances. And so they're one of the key findings for this break-even point.
Okay, does that review include the Sarah T. Hughes Field Politics Center at Goucher College study in 2017? Is that included in the inflection point you're making on page 24?
It does not. My understanding of the Sarah T. Hughes Goucher College study is it's a survey of residents of Maryland. And we can see here again, page 16, lines 13 through 16. Results show that 11% say that seeing the turbines on the horizon would make them less likely to vacation in Ocean City, and 12% say it would make them more likely. 3/4 are indifferent. So I think that's a very relevant data point for Ocean City, and seeing that essentially net zero impact. But my understanding of that survey is there's no variation in distance. They're not asking people about specific distances.
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any additional questions from commissioners? Seeing none, do any of the parties wish to question the witness based on Commissioner O'Donnell's questioning?
No, Your Honor.
Hearing none?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Farday. Hearing none? Dr. Lang, you are excused.
Thank you.
Mr. Koren, do you have any additional witnesses?
No, Your Honor. That's our full complement of witnesses for this proceeding.
Thank you. As we had in place yesterday, we'll take breaks at about every 90 minutes or so. So at this point, we will continue, and we will begin with the case by the town of Ocean City, Maryland.
Call the mayor. Mr. Mayor, you want to pull up here? We'll just exhibit over for testimony.
It's in that outline.
Right here in the middle. Can you pull it?
Sure. Would please raise your right hand. Oh, if we could, the call reporter's on mute. Here we go. Linda, we hear you.
Am I okay now?
You're good.
Okay, I don't know why that's mind of its own, but. Mr. Mayor, do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Mr. Mayor, good morning. Thank you. Could you tell the members of the commission your full name, your business address.
My name is Richard W. Meehan, and I am the mayor of Ocean City, and our address is 305 South Baltimore Avenue.
And Mayor Meehan, how long have you been the mayor of Ocean City?
I've been mayor of Ocean City since 2006.
And prior to 2006, did you hold other offices in the Ocean City government?
I did. I was elected to the city council in 1985, and I served 14 years as the council president before becoming mayor.
And you're here today not only on behalf of yourself, but on behalf of the city council of Ocean City and the Ocean City government and taxpayers and residents.
That is correct.
Now, you submitted, showing you what is marked as Exhibit 10, you submitted direct testimony on April the 17th, 2020 to the commission. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And Exhibit 10 is that direct testimony.
Correct.
And Exhibits 11 through 16 were the exhibits that you identified and discussed in that direct testimony. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And this direct testimony was prepared by you and under your supervision. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And if you were to testify in full about that direct testimony, would you today issue the same testimony that you gave before and offer the same exhibits?
I would.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I would move into evidence exhibits and the direct testimony in exhibits 11 through 16, which were the exhibits identified by the mayor. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Mayor, before we do that, you have one minor change.
I do have a minor change in my testimony, my direct testimony on page 4, line 4, item A. It states in there on on February 27th, 2018, when in fact that date should be June 6th, 2018.
With that one change, would you have given the testimony in its entirety as it was submitted in Exhibit 10 on April 17, 2020?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, I'd like to, Mr. Mayor, now to ask you some live rejoinder.
Mr. Maloney, are you moving these into evidence?
I am. Thank you.
Seeing no objection, we'll move Ocean City's exhibits 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, with the correction noted to exhibit 10 into evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask you some live rejoinder questions, and directing your attention to the rebuttal testimony yesterday of Joyce Weber and briefly by Brady Walker. Have you had an opportunity to review their rebuttal testimony?
Yes.
Do you agree with the statement on page 3 of the rebuttal testimony that Skipjack has, quote, continued routine outreach to Ocean City representatives and stakeholders for the past several years?
I do not.
Tell
Mr. Coran, you're a little late,
Sorry.
but
And a quick objection, Your Honor, just to relevancy.
okay. Objection for the record, the witness has answered.
And would you tell the members of the commission the basis of your disagreement?
Well, I don't believe that we received timely updates, particularly in the last year, about the changes that were being contemplated or had been made with regard to the size of the turbines from Skipjack. I don't think we received some of the follow-up information that we had requested with regard to layouts after our meeting in July of 2019. And subsequently, after that meeting, we basically had no interaction with Skipjack or any conversation or any dialogue with them until the public hearing that was held in January of 2020.
And at any time since 2017, has Skipjack or its predecessor sat down and had any dialogue with you about the size of the turbines, the locations of the turbines, or efforts to, or steps that could be taken to minimize the present?
Not specifically. Most of the conversations that we did have and meetings that we did have with Skipjack, they were there to inform us of their intentions, but took very little into account what we expressed back to them or gave any indication that they were making efforts to address our problem, which is the visual problem that the turbines create off the coast of Ocean City.
And do you agree that Skipjack never discussed with you or the council or the government the plans to use or where to site and the 12 megawatt turbines, other than the brief reference on July 15th, 2019 by Ms. Weber that they were being considered?
That's correct.
Did she tell you at that time the details that they had gone in before in terms of already making a decision to go forward?
She did not.
Did you learn that in these proceedings for the first time?
Yeah.
And do you feel you were misled by Skipjack?
I do feel there was a lack of accurate information given to the town of Ocean City.
Do you agree with the Skipjack statement on page 3 of their rebuttal testimony that Skipjack cannot build its project to be located 33.2 statute miles from the Maryland shores?
I do not.
Tell the commission why.
Well, obviously, as been testified to, there are other projects that are built further off the coast than that particular designation as well. I also believe that designated area extends at least 30 miles, and as far back as 2017, we had requested as our part of this conversation, an ongoing one-sided conversation, that Skipjack look to BOEM to have those lease areas expanded or renewed in further east of the shoreline town of Ocean City. We were told that that was something that would take too long and wouldn't be able to be done. Well, that was 5 years ago, and the process was at that time told to us it would take 3 to 5 years.
And has Skipjack or its predecessor ever engaged with you on a consensus that could be developed to locate the wind turbines in an area where they would not be visible from the shoreline?
They have not.
And is that the goal of the mayor and council?
That is the goal of the mayor and council.
Is the mayor and council opposed to wind turbines, or what's your position?
No, the mayor and council is not opposed to the wind turbines, and I stated that as far back as April of 2017 when I spoke at a public hearing of the Public Service Commission. The mayor and council supports wind energy. We support renewable energy. We support the jobs that it creates. We support the economic benefits, not just to this area, but to the entire state of Maryland. However, we don't want it done at the detriment of the town of Ocean City. We would like to be a good partner and have it so that, in fact, it can be built, but it be built further enough off our coast, and not to jeopardize our tourism industry.
If Skipjack does use the 12 megawatt turbines, what specific mitigation steps do you believe they should take to minimize the impact on the Ocean City viewshed?
Objection.
Sustained.
And before you have cross-examination here from the other council, what final statement or statements would you like to make to the commission about it?
Well, to the
Sustained.
Your Honor.
Sustained.
And do you believe that, do you agree with the statements that were made yesterday by Ms. Weber and others that the current location minimizes the impact on the Ocean City viewshed?
It does not. And as I look at where it's proposed to be, and even in conversation, I think it was suggested it could actually be moved further within the lease area as it exists today. And I also listened to the presentation with regard to the renderings, and conspicuous by their absence were renderings showing the sunrise in the town of Ocean City. And what we have stated from the very beginning is it is that sunrise in particular that is iconic and can only be viewed in the state of Maryland in two places, Ocean City, Maryland, and Assateague Island. Other than that, there is nowhere else that you watch the sunrise over the ocean in the state of Maryland. 8 million visitors a year come to the town of Ocean City. And if you walk out on the boardwalk like I do early in the morning before the sun rises, you would be absolutely amazed at the thousands of people that are on the beach or the balcony watching that pristine sunrise over the Atlantic in the state of Maryland. these turbines will alter that view and that natural view forever. Future generations will not know what that view looked like before those turbines were built. That's the concern that we have. An awful lot of things in this world have changed. Some things shouldn't change. And we believe this is one of them. That is the basis of our concern. And if that can be rectified, the town of Ocean City would support the wind turbine project.
And as far as rectification, was yesterday's testimony by Mr. Graffard the first time you have heard that it might be possible to move the wind turbines elsewhere in the leasehold area to minimize the visual impact?
It was, and still I'm not sure exactly where the closest point to shore is, if it's 21.5 miles or 22.7 miles. And I think that those are distances that need to be validated before approval is made. But I think the testimony yesterday also showed that even with regard to the current lease area, it would be possible to move that one row of turbines even further to the east, which again would help minimize the visibility of those turbines from the shoreline. The only place we have to go to ask this is before the Maryland Public Service Commission. BOEM isn't going to protect the view off the coast of the town of Ocean City, but the Public Service Commission of Maryland Public Service Commission, excuse me, can represent the citizens of Maryland and protect our shoreline.
And finally, are you willing, consistent with the Commission's May 17th, 2017 order, to engage in consultation and a constructive dialogue with Skipjack to follow up on the suggestion yesterday that it might be possible to relocate the turbines in the leasehold area?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Karen, your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Skipjack doesn't have any questions for this witness.
Thank you. Do any other parties have cross-examination for the mayor? Hearing none.
Yes, Your Honor. Briefly.
Mr. Dean.
Good morning. I'm Michael Dean, staff witness or staff attorney for the Maryland Public Service Commission. I just have a few questions that shouldn't take very long. On page 5 of your direct testimony, line 15, given its extreme, or I should say extensive development, say that Ocean City has a pristine views.
When you watch the sunrise over the horizon of the Atlantic every day off the coast of Ocean City, it's an unobstructed view. There's no permanent structures out there that would do anything to desecrate that view. And that's the view we've been looking at for hundreds of years. And I hope that's the view we continue to look at for the next 100 years.
Thank you. Is it your testimony that the 8 megawatt turbines previously under consideration did not impact the pristine views at Ocean City?
It is not. At where they were designated to be located at that time, they would also have an effect on the views off the coast of Ocean City. The effect of the larger turbine even increases that, and also the fact that we have no idea where those turbines are being located.
Thank you. On pages 6 and 7 of your testimony, you discuss the detrimental impacts on tourism from the offshore wind turbines. Is it your testimony that the 8 megawatt turbines previously under consideration did not have a detrimental impact on tourism?
It is not, but again, I do want to stress that we had no definitive location for where they would be placed.
Thank you very much. On page 8 of your direct testimony at lines 9 through 14, where you discuss the impact of the FAA lighting on the nighttime ocean vista of Ocean City. By your testimony, are you recommending that the commission require that the skipjack turbines not be visible at all during the night from Ocean City?
Yes.
Thank you. Is it your testimony that the 8 megawatt turbines previously under consideration
Again, I would have to say that that would be based on the location of those turbines, that we never had any specific location that was given to us to where they would be located. That was never approved, and we had no idea. That's part of the problem, no idea.
Thank you for your answer there. On page 8 at lines 15 to 16, you state that Orsted has not provided any reason why the Skipjack project cannot be built more than 33 miles from shore from Maryland.
Yes.
And then on page 9, lines 8 through 13, after noting that turbines and other projects can be built more than 30 miles from shore, you state that Maryland should do no less. Do you know whether under Maryland law, the Public Service Commission can require the turbines of the Skipjack project be located greater than 30 miles from the Maryland shore?
Would you repeat that question?
Yes, sir. Do you know whether under Maryland law, whether the Public Service Commission can require the turbines of the Skipjack project be located greater than 30 miles from the Maryland shore?
I do not, but I do not believe that you have to approve them being located any closer to them.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you for testifying today.
Thank you.
Are there any other parties that seek to question the mayor on cross-examination? Do commissioners have any questions for the witness? Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mayor. Always good to see you.
Good to see you, Commissioner O'Donnell.
I wanted to ask you, and I'd been planning on asking you about the last question that the staff counsel asked you about, and it's the 30-mile requirement. Do you know if there's been any effort to change that statutory requirement in the legislature to require an expanded area beyond 30 miles in Maryland statute?
We have made that request, but I don't know if that request has been acted upon.
So you don't know if there's been a bill or if Ocean City has testified on a bill in front of the legislature to do that?
Are you talking about requesting that the physical turbines be moved further than 30 miles from the coast?
Yes, sir.
We have made that request, but we have not, it has not been successful at this point.
But there was a bill that was put in and it had hearings in front of the legislative committees?
Yes, there was.
Okay, and Ocean City testified in favor of the bill, but the bill did not pass the legislature, is that right?
I believe the bill got out of committee.
Okay, very good, sir. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Seeing no other questions from commissioners, do any parties wish to inquire of the witness based on the responses to Commissioner O'Donnell? Hearing none, the witness is excused.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You may call your next witness for Ocean City.
Mr. Chairman, the town of Ocean City calls Robert Sullivan.
Sullivan, if you would turn your microphone on and raise your right hand.
Can you hear me?
We could hear you, sir. court reporter. The witness is in position.
Okay, thank you. Sir, do you swear and affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Sullivan, can you please state your full name for the record?
Robert Gerald Sullivan.
And Mr. Sullivan, where are you employed?
I am employed by Argonne National Laboratory. The address is 9700 South Cass, C-A-S-S Avenue in Lamont, Illinois.
What is your position there?
I'm a visual resource scientist in the Environmental Assessment Division at Argonne.
And how long have you been in that position?
I've been employed by Argonne elsewhere. I have been in this current position since, I want to say 2007.
And can you briefly explain for the commission what your role as a virtual resource scientist entails?
Visual resource scientist. So I do a variety of things. I have conducted research on the visibility of energy facilities in the landscape and seascape. Those studies have been alluded to in the testimony we've heard. I have conducted a number of environmental impact assessments for various federal agencies across a range of renewable and fossil energy technologies. I develop visual impact assessment methodologies, various federal agencies. I'm currently developing the seascape, landscape, and visual impact assessment methodology for BOEM, for offshore wind energy. And I do want to mention one of the EISs I did was a programmatic EIS for renewable energy development on the Outer Continental Shelf for Minerals Management Service back in 2007. So that's the time period that I started on offshore wind. I also, at this point, have expertise in visual impact mitigation. And so I have written a book and several other publications on visual simulation and on strategies for visual impact mitigation for renewable energy and other energy facilities.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, we would ask that Mr. Sullivan be qualified as an expert in the field of visual impact analysis and visual resource science.
Thank you. Does any party have voir dire of Mr. Sullivan?
Your Honor, Skipjack has no objection to Mr. Sullivan being so qualified for the purposes of this proceeding.
Thank you. I do agree that Mr. Sullivan has requisite expertise to provide his expert opinion with respect to the scope of his testimony.
And Mr. Sullivan, you submitted direct testimony on April 17th, 2020 in this case?
Yes.
And is Ocean City's Exhibit 1 that direct testimony?
Yes.
And are Ocean City's Exhibits 2 through 8 the exhibits that you submitted with your direct testimony?
Yes.
And this direct testimony was prepared by you or prepared under your direct supervision?
Yes.
And looking at the direct testimony, do you have any additions or corrections that you'd like to make now?
Yes.
Can you go ahead and state what those are?
Yes. On page 4, line 3, I would like to change the word sometimes to often. On page 5, line 18, I would like to change at least some to many.
Mr. Sullivan, if I could stop you there, are you referring to your rebuttal testimony or your?
My direct testimony.
Okay, thank you.
On page 9, lines 7 and 8, I'd like to change on clear days, particularly in the early morning or late afternoon, or when viewed against dark clouds in the afternoon, to on clear days in the early morning or late afternoon, or when viewed against dark clouds in the afternoon, the project would likely be obvious to many people without scanning the horizon. On page 9, line 18, I would like to add the following statement. Additional lighting impacts would result from flashing aerial hazard navigation lights that would be installed partway up the towers. This additional flashing aerial hazard navigation lighting is mandated by FAA because the turbines exceed 699 feet in height. Viewers in the upper floors of multi-story buildings may also see marine navigation lighting near the base of the turbines that would be amber in color. On page 14, lines 3 through 4, I would like to change under clear weather conditions, the project's wind turbines would frequently be visible from the northern section of Ocean City, both day and night, to the following. Under clear weather conditions, the project's wind turbines would frequently be visible from oceanfront locations in the northern and central sections of Ocean City during the day, and all oceanfront locations in Ocean City at night, wherever there was an unobstructed view of the project. That's all.
And Mr. Sullivan, if I were to ask you with those corrections or additions, the same questions in that document today under oath, would your answers be the same?
They would.
And you also submitted a rebuttal testimony in this case on May 22nd, 2020.
That's correct.
And is Ocean City's Exhibit 9 that rebuttal testimony?
Yes, it is.
That rebuttal testimony was prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes.
And the rebuttal testimony was prepared in response to the direct testimony of Skipjack's witness, Gordon Perkins?
Yes.
And do you have any additions or corrections that you need to make now to that rebuttal testimony?
Yes. On page 1, line 19, I would like to delete the word documented. And that's all.
And if I were to ask you the same questions with that change that is in your rebuttal testimony under oath, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, we would ask that Ocean City's Exhibits 1 through 9 be admitted and entered.
Hearing no objections, Ocean City Exhibits number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are moved into evidence. Counsel, within 7 days of today's hearing, I would ask that you submit a red line version of Mr. Sullivan's direct testimony due to the substantial number of changes, please.
We will do so.
Thank you.
At this time, we have some rejoinder related to Mr. Perkins's written rebuttal testimony and some of the statements that he made during his testimony yesterday.
Okay. Briefly.
Mr. Sullivan, have you had an opportunity to review Mr. Perkins' rebuttal testimony?
Yes.
And if you take a look at page 7, lines 11 through 17 of his rebuttal testimony, Mr. Perkins states that he disagrees with your conclusion that on some days the simulations would appear brighter white than is seen in Mr. Perkins' daytime simulations. Do you agree with that?
No,
Why not?
primarily because on many occasions I've observed turbines to be brighter white than shown in the simulation. It is the case that turbines so far are almost all in a very uniform white color, although BOEM does not require that. So they are very consistent in color across projects. So having seen in a number of situations turbines that were brighter than shown in that simulation, I can say without question that they can be brighter than that.
And do you agree with Mr. Perkins' statement on page 7, lines 15 through 17, that the intent of the visual simulations provided in Exhibit GWP2 is to provide a worst-case assessment of project visibility under normal and common viewing conditions?
Well, that may have been the intent, but the actual worst case scenario for contrast would actually be in early morning when the turbines would be backlit by the rising sun. In a publication authored by Mr. Perkins, the New York State Offshore Wind Master Plan Visibility Threshold Study, he says in more than one place that morning is when the contrast would be greatest. And I have 2 quotes that illustrate that if you would like to hear them. They're very brief. Okay, so on the executive summary on page 1, I'm quoting here, in the morning before 10 a.m. with clear skies, when color contrast is highest, offshore winds are possibly most visible. On page 22, he says the highest, this is part of his sentence, the highest color contrast and most visible conditions, and then in parentheses it says morning, comma, clear skies.
And do you agree?
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to go on with the answer. So Mr. Perkins describes the simulation in GWP2 as showing late afternoon lighting under clear conditions against a darker backdrop of clouds. But if you look at the simulation, the backdrop of the wind turbines is not dark. The clouds above are dark, but behind the wind turbines are open sky. And furthermore, I can easily show that the simulation does not show the maximum contrast or anything close to it by looking at something that is in a proprietary document. So I don't know if I'll have that opportunity, but it will very clearly demonstrate that the conditions shown in GWP2 are not close to the maximum contrast that this project will incur.
And is the proprietary document you're referring to, is that the visual impact assessment done in this case?
Yes.
And do you agree with Mr. Perkins' testimony on page 8, lines 11 through 15, that the ideal lighting conditions for viewing the turbines in Exhibit GWP2 could occur for approximately 80 minutes on any clear haze-free day?
No, I think that the conditions that I'm referring to as high contrast, which would occur in both morning and afternoon, are significantly longer than the period of time stated by Mr. Perkins. In fact, in the NYSERDA study, he describes these conditions of the highest visibility of the wind turbines occurring in the morning before 10 o'clock. So on most days, that would be a period of several hours. And you would have similar conditions in the afternoon where it would be several hours, potentially.
And Mr. Perkins states in his rebuttal testimony on page 8, lines 17 to 20, that during 14% of a given, given day, visibility does not even extend to 10 miles. And he revised that yesterday to change 14% to 20%. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, I can't disagree with that statement. However, there's an important issue here that has to do with statements about visibility that I'd like to discuss briefly. So from the Meteorological Service for International Air.
Mr. Sullivan, I'm not going to allow you just to have an open-ended discussion. If counsel has a question for you, you can pose the question.
Mr. Sullivan, what specifically do you disagree with in terms of his statement?
That you cannot see any object beyond when visibility is stated to be less than 10 miles, that you cannot see any object beyond 10 miles. The implication of that is that if the visibility is stated to be 9.5 miles, you could not see an 800-foot tall wind turbine, and that is not true. You can. All that a statement about 10-mile visibility says is that it is a clear, that the atmosphere is clear. If you could see 150 miles, it would still say that the visibility is 10 miles. And that's because it is in reference to a hypothetical black object of unspecified size. That is the criterion for measuring visibility. So it isn't the case that an 800-foot tall wind turbine isn't going to be visible at less than 10 miles necessarily. Now, if it's the case that the visibility is a quarter mile or a half mile, that means really that there's dense fog or rain. And I grant you definitely would not see the wind farm in that situation. But to say that you can't see anything beyond 10 miles when the visibility is not quite 10 miles is not correct.
Mr. Sullivan, on page 10, line 8 of his rebuttal testimony, Mr. Perkins disagrees with your testimony that the ocean in Ocean City is devoid of significant number of existing lights and an unlit featureless blackness. He also attaches GWP 7 and GWP 8 showing nighttime simulations of Ocean City. Do you have a response to that?
Yes, I have not personally been to Ocean City to look at the lighting situation in the area that we are talking about, but I have information from 2 residents who look specifically at this area, and they have both said that there are very few lights visible in the ocean from this location, and that ship traffic visible from shore is rare. I have no reason to doubt their statements. Furthermore, about the 2 photographs that Mr. Perkins supplied, I know from looking at photographs immediately adjacent to these 2 photographs that they show substantially darker areas than he chose to include in these 2 photographs. So in essence, what I'm saying here is to take a picture of an amusement park when you know that right next to the amusement park is an area that is far darker than the amusement park, and say that the amusement park is representative of the ambient lighting situations is misleading. Similarly, to take a photograph of the ocean view at night when 2 very brightly lit ships just happen to be passing in front of your viewpoint, and using that to say that there are a lot of lights on the horizon, when you have at the same time taken photos of immediately adjacent portions of the horizon that show a far lower level of lighting, to pick that photograph and say this is representative of the lighting conditions is also misleading.
Okay, I'm gonna step in at this point. Witness just testified to the impressions of 2 fact witnesses. Obviously, in these administrative proceedings, hearsay is permissible, but we do not know the identity of these 2 people that Mr. Sullivan is referring to as Ocean City witnesses.
I can provide that. I did not say they were witnesses.
You said that they provide their observations of lighting conditions?
They were residents, I said, I believe.
Residents. And are you testifying that they provided you with firsthand accounts of their observations?
Yes.
Okay, can you provide us with their names?
Terry McGean and the mayor.
Thank you. Can you spell the name of the first individual?
It's Terry McGean. He is the city engineer for Ocean City. That is MC capital Gean.
Thank you. Ms. Aprade, how much more rejoinder do we have?
2 or 3 more questions.
Okay, and then we'll take our 11:30 break after your examination is finished.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan. On page 11, lines 6 through 16 of Mr. Perkins' rebuttal testimony, he states that it's not sound visual impact practice to use visual simulations prepared for a different hypothetical project to opine on the visual impact of an actual project under development. Do you agree with that?
I think that statement is a mischaracterization of what I was saying. That the simulations prepared for BOEM in that North Carolina simulation study were to be used to assess the visual impact of the Skipjack project. I said that I felt, based on my extensive field observations, that they were a better representation of the level of contrast that would be expected under the lighting conditions in those simulations, okay? I am not saying, and was not saying, that they are an appropriate substitute for the impact assessment of this specific project.
Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Perkins was asked yesterday about Skipjack Exhibit 9, which is Ocean City's response to data request 1-94. And in that data request, it was asked whether you agree that the visual simulations that Mr. Perkins created use an appropriate methodology. Can you explain whether you agreed with the methodology that Mr. Perkins used?
Yes, so in essence, no. The reason is that while it looks to me from the information I have that the simulations were technically prepared properly, meaning they show the objects in the right location, and he did the actual preparation of each of those simulations properly, the simulations taken as a whole, I believe, do not represent the visibility of the project at either turbine size. In fact, the 3 simulations that Mr. Perkins provided with his testimony, for 2 of those 3 simulations, the project is not visible at all. But we know from examining the weather conditions in this area that the vast majority of time the visibility is good, and that more than half the time the sky is clear. So to present 3 simulations that purport to represent the visibility of the project, and in 2 of those you show the project not visible at all, which, by the way, is a violation of sound professional practice, it's misleading. It creates a subtle bias when you see 2 simulations where the project isn't visible at all. And in the one simulation that you do show, it does not show the project in the typical worst case scenario, which is what you are supposed to do when preparing a visual impact assessment. Because if he had, he would show it in the morning, where by his own statements and other documents, that is the time of highest contrast that occurs routinely. And as the mayor said, it occurs often, and it is an area of very high use of this view.
And finally, Mr. Sullivan, do you think that cumulative impact is something that Mr. Perkins should have considered when looking at the viewshed impact of 12 megawatt turbines here?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
We have nothing further on rejoinder.
Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break at this time. We will recess until 11:40 a.m. Eastern. Hello? Okay. I was good. Ready to leave the room because I have to be near a window in here to speak. I don't know why this thing keeps muting. You know that? You know. See, it keeps doing that. I haven't even touched it. It says it's muted.
cyclical, but I think growthier part of the market. Again, betting on a recovery in the second half of the year, in which the consumer is a large participant. 33% household savings rates in the month of April, provided we continue to support we're one of the jobs, I think, because
Okay, we'll begin the cross-examination of Mr. Sullivan by attorneys for Skipjack.
Thank you, Your Honor. Chris Gunnarsson on behalf of Skipjack. Mr. Sullivan, you did not create any visual simulations of the Skipjack project, correct?
Yes, correct. I did not.
And you do not create visual simulations professionally, correct?
At this time, no.
Thank you. Your Honor, those are all the questions that we have from Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you. Do any other parties have cross-examination for Mr. Sullivan? Do commissioners have any questions for Mr. Sullivan? Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for your testimony today. And as you're aware, what we're trying to do here is understand the different impacts between the two towers, the two turbines. Now, in your testimony, you talk about on certain days the project will be easily visible from many oceanside locations. Is that just for the 12 megawatt tower, or would the 8 megawatt towers have also been visible?
They both would have been visible. Yes.
Okay. So now just help me understand the impact between going from the 600, the 8, or yeah, I guess it's the 600 foot, 641 foot tower at 19.5 miles out to a 12 or 853 foot tower at 21 miles out. What can you just give me a sense of, the relative change and how visible that would be from the beach or from an office building? Is it significant? Is it? I understand.
I would say, significant is kind of a subjective term, but I would say no. Generally, it isn't. The larger turbine has, wider components, right? The blade's thicker. The tower is bigger because it's supporting quite a bit more weight. And so it is going to be slightly thicker. Obviously, it is going to be slightly taller. It will have the lighting on the mast, right, partway up, because it exceeds 700 feet in height. That would not be the case for the other turbine. So you would see some difference at night. You would see a distinct difference under conditions clear enough that you would see the tower. But in the day, the size it's a little bit bigger, but nothing too significant.
Okay. So, and I guess you didn't really testify to this, but I'm just trying to understand from a beachgoer's experience or a resident's experience. Would this change, material change their experience at all? Would somebody on the beach say, oh my gosh, look at that 8 megawatt tower versus a 12 megawatt tower,
Generally no, but with one possible exception that's kind of important. I looked at the math just in the course of the last day because of the height of the hub, that is the nacelle of the larger turbines, to move them within the lease area to a point where the nacelle would be below the horizon, so that you would not see the tower, you would only see the blade, and you would not see any lighting at night. That would completely eliminate nighttime impacts and quite substantially reduce daytime impacts. With an 8 megawatt turbine, I believe that I haven't yet done the math, but could come back in an hour, with a decent idea, I would want other people to check it. You could potentially move a smaller turbine back far enough that the nacelle would drop below the horizon. And you would then completely eliminate nighttime impacts and have a very large effect on daytime impacts, because you would only see the blade, going above the horizon. It would be very low to the water, and the blade is thin relative to the tower. So just seeing the blades, even though they're moving, that makes them a little bit more visible, but that would be significantly lower impact.
Okay. All right. So I guess what I've heard, so the difference really though in these two towers, what we're talking about here and what we're supposed to consider is pretty much, I think you just said insignificant, or.
Yeah, I would, you know what, in informal terms, I'd say it's a wash.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Sullivan.
So the same just.
I'm sorry, I can't hear well here.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, not well, but I can hear you.
Can other parties hear me, Mr. Chairman?
You're not breaking up for me, so I think we can proceed.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
okay.
I could hear you. We had some open mics, which I think are now shut.
Okay. So sorry about that, Mr. Sullivan. Could you go to page 14 of your direct testimony, please?
Sure. Hold on just 1 second. Okay, I'm there.
Okay, I'm going to ask you some couple questions about lines 21 and 22 on page 14, carrying over to lines 1 and 2 on page 15. And so I'm going to break this up to make sure I understand what you're saying. The first part of that sentence beginning on line 21 says, while by itself, the Skipjack project would not cause significant visual impacts to Ocean City, comma. And I understand your position, I believe I do, on cumulative effect. But is your testimony that if the Skipjack project, which this proceeding is about, goes from a 8 megawatt turbine to a 12 megawatt turbine, that change by itself would not cause significant visual impacts to Ocean City?
If Skipjack stuck with the current number of 12 megawatt turbines in the current configuration, I actually think the cumulative effects would be smaller. Because I believe that the visual impacts of this project are not increased at all by moving to 12 megawatt turbines if Skipjack keeps them in the current configuration or improves it, which definitely could be done. But the question really deals with the importance of considering cumulative effects when you are considering the visual impacts of any offshore wind project. It's a major issue for BOEM.
I get that, and we're going to talk about the second half of that sentence in a second. But the first half of that sentence, and I think I hear you acknowledging, by and of itself, the Skipjack project would have this change to a 12 megawatt turbine would not cause significant visual impacts to Ocean City. We'll get to the cumulative effects by itself.
Direct. So the difference would be, we'd call those direct impacts versus cumulative. I do not think that change, and I want to qualify this, of course, because we're talking about a design envelope. If they keep with the current number of turbines in the current configuration, I believe the impact would not configuration what I just said may not apply.
So your testimony then, should the U.S. wind project not go forward in the BOEM process, now we're adding the second half of the sentence in, should that not go forward for some reason, any myriad of reasons could keep it from going forward, the Skipjack project would not cause significant visual impact to Ocean City if there wasn't a cumulative impact by another proposed project. Am I reading your testimony correct?
Okay, I think that a clarification is in order here. So when I was considering the cumulative effects, which by the way are a legal requirement of an environmental impact assessment under NEPA, is the primary one that I was aware of because I had looked at the project was this U.S. wind project. That obviously is a very large project and is going to have very large effects on Ocean City views. However, so if that goes away, the cumulative effects of Skipjack would presumably be lessened because another big source of impacts is gone. However, I heard yesterday that, and it makes perfect sense, Ørsted and other developers may eventually be putting other projects in here. So the issue of cumulative effects from Skipjack would apply even if the U.S. wind project did not go forward, because it would apply for any other projects that were within the viewshed.
Right. Well, you could take that to its extreme and say no offshore wind project should ever go forward in their current configuration and the current processes. But I just want to understand your words.
I don't agree with that.
Okay, well, hang on. That's my opinion, but let me just ask you about your words in your testimony. You're saying that in the NEPA process at BOEM and the federal agencies who do an interagency review in the NEPA process, that's where the cumulative effect will be taken into consideration, correct?
It will be taken into consideration at that point. However, any visual impact assessment should include a cumulative effects analysis.
I'm just trying to figure out how this commission I'm just trying to figure out how this commission can project cumulative effects when we don't have that process before us. And I'm just trying to figure out the impact of going from an 8 megawatt turbine to a 12 megawatt turbine. And I'm trying to figure out what your words are saying here. That's all I'm trying to do.
So, you know what I think, to get to the heart of what you're saying, is I do not think that there will be a significant Skipjack project, whether it is 8 megawatts or 12. To be critical, there is a potential problem if they use different designs of turbines in close proximity, or if you are looking through one project to another that is behind it, and the turbine design is different, because that can create visual chaos, more or less. However, the odds are that it would be a very minor effect.
I appreciate it. Appreciate your answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no further.
Thank you. Commissioner Herman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sullivan, I just have some questions, and I don't know if you were listening to Mr. Perkins' testimony, but I asked him similar questions. You have in your testimony, you have 146th Street, and then you have Ocean City Beach. And then I've also heard you mention South and North and Central Ocean City. Can you define those terms for me, please?
Yes. So, well, I guess I obviously don't have to explain 146th Street. Okay? So when I say Ocean City Beach, that's coming from two sources. One, if you go to Google and you look at Ocean City, there is a point there that's called Ocean City Beach, okay? Whether or not that's what it's actually called, that's how it's identified on Google. I think more importantly, in simulations that have been prepared for this project, there are viewpoints that are named Ocean City Beach. And so those are the areas I am referring to.
Okay, and when you say Central Ocean City, what, can you give me parameters of like what blocks, between First Street and 146th Street?
I really can't because I'm not that familiar with Ocean City, frankly. And, but I would regard, just from looking at the map that I saw, that area that is marked on Google as Ocean City Beach as being the central portion. I'm talking north to south.
Okay. And so I think you said this earlier, but I just wanted to make sure I understood. You actually haven't been to Ocean City, Maryland to see the views and that sort of thing. You're using maps and Google and things like that.
That's correct. Yes. And what's in the VIA.
Okay. Let me see. I think that's all I had. Thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan.
Sure thing.
Thank you. At this point, are there any questions from the parties based on the questioning by Commissioner Richard, O'Donnell, and Herman? Hearing none, the witness is excused.
Thank you.
Town of Ocean City, you may call your next witness.
Dr. Terry was projected to be our next witness, Mr. Chairman, but we've been advised she has some last-minute issues which preclude her from testifying, so we will not be offering her as a witness in these proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Do you have any additional witnesses? Thank you. At this time, we will move to the Maryland Energy Administration. Please call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, MEA calls Samuel Byrne. Sam. I'm trying to see if I can. Mr. Byrne?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry. Okay. Can you please state?
We'll have the witness sworn in by the court reporter.
His direct testimony.
We'll need to open up the court reporter's mic.
We don't know what tab it is.
We have a cross-examination on this or not? If not, I can just.
Can you hear me?
We could hear you, Madam Court Reporter.
Okay. Sir, do you swear and affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Your witness.
Thank you. Can you please state your full name and spell your last name?
My name is Samuel Byrne. My last name is spelled B-E-I-R-N-E.
And can you please state your current place of employment and your job title with the place of employment?
I work for the Maryland Energy Administration, or MEA. I am an energy program manager focusing on energy storage and wind energy.
And can you provide your business address, please?
My business address is 1800 Washington Boulevard, Suite 755, Baltimore, Maryland, 21230.
And do you have a document before you pre-marked as MEA Exhibit 1, the direct testimony of Samuel Byrne, consisting of 5 pages, filed on April 17th, 2020?
Yes.
And attached to that document is an errata to the direct testimony of Samuel Byrne, consisting of 1 page, filed on May 22nd, 2020?
Yes.
And attached to that errata, do you have a red line further noting the changes to your direct testimony?
Yes.
And the direct testimony, the errata, and the red line were either prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes.
And do you have a document pre-marked as MEA Exhibit 2, the rebuttal testimony of Samuel Byrne, consisting of one page dated May 22nd, 2020?
Yes.
And was this document prepared by you or prepared under your supervision?
Yes.
And are there any changes, corrections, or clarifications that you wish to make at this time to your direct and rebuttal testimony?
No.
And were the statements that were made by you in your direct or rebuttal testimony truthful and to the best of your knowledge and belief at the time that they were made?
Yes.
If I were to ask you the same questions in your testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I move that Exhibit 1 and 2 be entered into evidence, MEA Exhibit 1 and 2.
Hearing no objection, MEA Exhibit 1 and 2 are moved into evidence.
Thank you. Samuel Byrne is now available for questioning.
Thank you. Do any parties have cross-examination for Mr. Byrne?
Mr. Byrne, you have made some statements about navigational safety and visibility with respect to the 12 megawatt turbines. MEA, you yourself don't have any particular expertise in this area, isn't that correct?
I would not say that I'm an expert in navigational safety or visibility. However, I do understand the basic fundamentals of these issues.
All right, well, while you may understand them, you do not now, nor have you ever held yourself out as an expert in either of those areas, isn't that correct?
Correct.
And you also are not, MEA has not conducted any studies on navigational safety in this case, have they?
The Maryland Energy Administration has not done any navigational safety studies.
All right. And with respect to visibility, MEA has not done any studies with respect to the visual impact of the proposed changes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. So the opinions you are basically expressing here are you as a layperson based on what you've seen, but they do not represent the formal position of the entire executive branch of the administration. Is that correct?
If by the entire executive branch you mean all of the various departments, agencies, then yes.
I mean the Hogan administration.
Correct.
I have no further questions.
Any additional cross-examination for Mr. Byrne? Commissioners have any questions of the witness? Seeing none, any redirect for this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. The witness is excused. Do you have any additional witnesses?
No, I do not, Your Honor.
Thank you. We'll next present the case of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Before we start, I thought maybe it might make sense to do a point of clarification in trying to introduce some of the testimony from Mr. Chang, that is, to be specific, the portions that have not been stricken. So if you would like, I can go through what specifically we would be trying to admit so that there's so the parties can have a chance to take a look and make sure that I haven't gotten anything wrong.
Correct, Laughlin. What we'll be admitting is the motion that I granted yesterday was with respect to the request of Skipjack as detailed in footnote 1 of their motion.
Okay, so if you're satisfied with that, then I can just move forward to submit the portions that were not stricken. But if you would like me to go with page and line sites, I can do that as well.
That's not necessary.
Okay, thank you. All right, OPC would like to call Mr. Max Chang.
Mr. Chang, if you will turn on your microphone and raise your right hand.
I'm present. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sir, do you swear and affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chang. Could you please state your name for the record?
My name is Maximilian Chang, Maximilian.
And could you please state your company name and address, please?
Sure. I am a principal associate with Synapse Energy Economics. Our offices are located at 485 Massachusetts Avenue, Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Do you have in front of you a document marked OPC Exhibit 1 titled The Rebuttal Testimony of Max Chang? I believe prior to the order, it was consisting of 14 pages and exhibits. And the date on that document is May 22nd, 2020.
I do.
Was this testimony prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes.
Do you have any corrections or revisions to your testimony? And if I asked you the same questions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Does your testimony have an exhibit that includes your education, your background, and your experience in utility regulatory matters?
Yes, it does. That would be Appendix 1, I believe.
And does it list the reports that you have authored in areas of utility regulation as an analyst?
Yes, it does.
Does it also list the testimony you have provided in regulatory proceedings?
It does.
And have you submitted testimony as an expert analyst in utility regulatory matters in front of this commission before?
Yes, I have. I've testified before this commission in case 9406, 9418, 9424, and 9431, which was the original Skipjack application.
At this time, I'd like to move OPC Exhibit 1 into the record. That is the portions that were not subject to the commission's order striking.
Hearing no objection, the unstricken portions of OPC Exhibit number 1 is moved into evidence.
And OPC would like to proffer Mr. Chang as an expert in utility matters and analysis, and would offer him for cross-examination.
Thank you. Any voir dire from the parties?
None from Skipjack.
Okay. Any parties wish to cross-examine Mr. Chang?
No questions from Skipjack.
Do commissioners have questions of Mr. Chang? Okay, that was easy. Thank you, Mr. Chang. You are excused.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, commissioners. That concludes OPC's testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Laughlin. We now turn to staff for the Maryland Public Service Commission.
Thank you, Your Honor. Staff would like to call Mr. Christopher Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. If you would please raise your right hand.
Do you swear and affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. So you're a witness.
Mr. Lowe, could you state your position at the commission?
I am an electrical engineer with the Public Service Commission of Maryland.
Thank you. Do you have a document entitled The Direct Testimony and Exhibit April 17, 2020, consisting of 9 pages and exhibits?
Yes, I do.
Was this document prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to this document?
No.
Thank you. Does this document constitute your testimony in this proceeding?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to mark this document as staff exhibit number 1.
So marked.
Thank you. And I'd also like to move it into the administrative record.
Staff Exhibit number 1 is moved into evidence.
Thank you. Mr. Lowell is available for cross-examination.
Thank you. Do any parties have cross for this witness? Hearing none, do commissioners have questions of this witness? Thank you. This witness is excused. Mr. Dean.
Other witnesses, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. At this time, with no additional witnesses to be called by any parties, we will discuss the briefing schedule and any post-hearing matters. We'll begin with preliminary matters. Do any of the parties have any questions of the bench?
Yes, Your Honor. Chris Gunderson on behalf of Skipjack. Just one preliminary matter as we finish up. Since Dr. Taylor's testimony, Ocean City witness Dr. Taylor's testimony was not admitted into the record, there's one portion of Mr. Meehan's testimony that references and quotes her testimony. And we just request that that portion of Mr. Meehan's testimony be stricken.
We would object to that, and we would point out that witnesses are entitled to rely upon the statements, testimony, and opinions of other witnesses, whether or not they were called as testimony or not. And indeed, throughout this proceeding, many of the witnesses, particularly the expert witnesses, have relied upon statements, studies, and hearsay of others without those being called as witnesses. And this is an administrative hearing where a reasonable amount of hearsay is permitted.
I tend to agree with Counsel for Ocean City on this, but I'd like to take a look for myself what we're looking at here. Mr. Gunderson, you said this was the direct testimony of Mayor Meehan?
Yes, Your Honor. So Ocean City Exhibit 10, and I believe the references are on page 6 and 7. So the bottom of page 6, beginning at line 23, Mr. Meehan references the Dr. Taylor's North Carolina study, and then going on to page 7 down to line 12, he discusses Dr. Taylor as being testifying in this matter, which at this point she did not.
Thanks. Mr. Gunderson, I'm going to deny your motion. Obviously, Dr. Taylor did not testify in this procedure, but Mr. Maloney is correct. This is an administrative proceeding where some degree of hearsay is permissible. The commission will give the appropriate weight to that testimony based on what we've heard and the witnesses that have testified live over the past 2 days. Any other motions or requests? In terms of briefing schedules, based on the content and the substance of the testimony, the exhibits that have been received into evidence over the past 2 days, I'm going to propose to the parties that we have one round of post-hearing briefs due 30 days from today, 30 pages in length. Any concerns or issues with that?
Mr. Chairman, from Ocean City's perspective, we don't have any objection to the general concept. I would question whether or not we will get transcripts in time. I don't want to put too much of a burden on our reporter, and I would suggest that the page limit be an additional 10, to 40, given the extensive amount of testimony.
Madam Court Reporter, can you opine on when transcripts will be ready?
30 days is Sunday, July 5th.
Thank you.
Normally, for normal delivery, is 10 business days.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd also point out that 30 days from now is July the 5th. So if that factors into your thinking. Maybe 40 and 40 instead of 30 and 30.
I find that's reasonable, if there's no objection from other parties. A maximum of 40. These briefs, if the parties feel the need to file them, will be due 40 days from today in this manner. Any other items that we need to address?
Nothing from Skipjack.
Thank you.
Nothing for Ocean City.
Thank you. I would like to thank everybody. Obviously, this is a different environment, but I felt that it went exceedingly well. Despite a glitch here or there, we were able to hear and see all of the live testimony and the practice by the attorneys before the commission. So thank you for your cooperation in this virtual hearing space. At this point, with nothing further, this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.
I do need to ask who would like a copy of the transcript?
Ocean City would.
MEA would.
Skipjack.
And Skipjack.
OPC will update you via email.
ABC will send an email. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.